Part 1. The chamber was quiet, too quiet for Lena Briggs. She stood alone in the center of the great hall, her boots clicking softly against the smooth glass-like floor. Around her, towering figures watched from their curved seats. Some had skin like polished stone, others shimmered like water in sunlight, and a few didn't seem solid at all, just shifting patterns of light and color. They were the Galactic Council, the rulers of peace, order, and judgment across 1,000 star systems. And today they waited for her final words. Lena took a slow breath. She was not afraid, not anymore. For 12 years she had worn Earth's colors on her shoulder, spoken for billions, and tried again and again to prove that humanity belonged among the stars. But no matter how many treaties she signed, how many reports she filed, or how many apologies she offered for old wars and old mistakes, the council always looked at her like she was a child who kept spilling milk at the dinner table. She stepped forward, her voice clear and calm. "Counselors," she began, "you asked for my final statement before the review ends. I'm here to give it." A low hum filled the room as the Zelosian delegate tilted his three-eyed head. His voice came through the translator as a series of soft chimes. "We expect honesty, Envoy Briggs." "Not excuses," Lena nodded. "You'll get honesty." She paused, then looked around at each of them. "For over a century, Earth tried to follow your rules. We cut our military by 90%. We shared our technology. We even changed our laws to match your ethics code. We did everything you asked." She walked slowly toward the center platform, where a hologram of Earth floated, blue and fragile. "But you never trusted us. Every time we made progress, you found a new reason to doubt us. When we helped rebuild the Kalari colony after the solar flare, you said we were showing off. When we gave food and medicine to the Grith refugees, you called it emotional manipulation. And when the Titan station collapsed, when 12,000 of our people died in the cold dark, you didn't send aid. You sent a report saying we failed to meet safety standards." Her voice didn't rise, but something in it made the air feel heavier. "That was the moment we realized the truth. You don't want us to succeed. You want us to stay small, quiet, grateful for every crumb of approval you toss our way." The Kalari counselor, a tall being with silver skin and eyes like liquid stars, leaned forward. "Is that why you've stopped attending sessions? Why your fleet movements are hidden behind encryption?" Lena turned to face her. "No, that's why we're leaving." A ripple of motion passed through the chamber. The Grith delegate shifted in his armored seat. The Zelosian's chime voice came again, sharper this time. "Leaving? Leaving where?" "Beyond your borders," Lena said. "Beyond your rules? Beyond your judgment?" She tapped a small device on her wrist. The hologram of Earth flickered and changed. Now it showed thousands of ships, sleek, strong, glowing with quiet power, moving in perfect formation through the void. "This is the Exodus fleet, 10,000 vessels, carrying every willing human who wants a new start. We've already evacuated most of Earth. The last shuttles leave tonight." Silence. Thick, stunned silence. "You cannot do this," the Zelosian said finally. "You are under probationary status. You must seek council approval for mass migration." Lena almost smiled. "We're not asking. We're informing. Your laws say a species may leave the conquered voluntarily, without interference. We've read the charter. Twice." The Kalari counselor's voice was softer now. "But why? You were so close to full membership." "Another decade of good behavior and what?" Lena interrupted gently. "Another century of being watched like criminals? Of having our children taught that human history is nothing but violence and greed? Of watching our scientists beg for permission to explore a single asteroid?" She looked down at her hands, then back up. "We don't want your membership anymore. We want our dignity." A young analyst in the back row, a human named Jaren Voss, one of the few Earthborn allowed to work in the conquered bureaucracy, lowered his head. He had spent years trying to bridge the gap, to explain both sides. Now he understood there was no bridge. Only a wall, built brick by brick with suspicion and pride. Lena stepped away from the hologram. "We tried to belong. We really did. But you made it clear over and over that we would never be equal, so we choose freedom instead." She turned to leave. Behind her, the Zelosian called out, "You'll be alone out there. No allies, no support. The void does not forgive mistakes." Lena stopped at the doorway but didn't look back. "We've been alone before. We survived ice ages, plagues, world wars. We'll survive this too." And with that, she walked out. Outside the spire, the twin suns of Varel Prime cast long shadows across the landing field. A small shuttle waited for her, its engines humming softly. As she climbed aboard, she looked up at the sky, not at the stars she was leaving behind, but at the dark space between them where no one had mapped the way. Inside the shuttle, pilot Marcus Boone gave her a nod. All set? She buckled herself in. Yeah, let's go home. Home's empty now, he said quietly. Not yet, she replied. Not while one of us is still breathing. The shuttle lifted off, rising above the gleaming towers of the conquered capital. Below in the great hall, the council remained seated, unmoving. The hologram of the Exodus fleet still floated in the air, a silent challenge. One by one, the delegates turned to each other, not with anger, but with something new. Doubt. They had watched humanity for generations, measuring, testing, correcting. But they had never truly seen them. Not until now, when it was too late to repair what had been broken. High above, the shuttle punched through the atmosphere and turned toward the edge of the system. Behind it, Earth's last envoy left the Galactic Concord not with a bang, not with a plea, but with a quiet step into the unknown. And somewhere far away, 10,000 ships waited, engines ready, hearts steady, ready to follow her into the dark. The council would watch. They always did. But this time there would be no report to file, no judgment to pass, only the slow sinking truth. They had lost something they never understood, and humanity at last was free. Back on Earth, the sky was clear and quiet. No sirens, no panic, no crowds shouting in the streets. The evacuation had been planned for years, practiced in drills, whispered about in homes and schools. Now it was real, and people moved with calm purpose like workers finishing a long shift. In Chicago, Daniel Ruiz stood on the porch of his old brick house, a worn duffel bag at his feet. He was a high school history teacher, not a soldier or a pilot, but today his job was simple: make sure his block got out safely. He checked his wristpad. 3 families left. Mrs. Alvarez needed help with her oxygen tank. Mr. Chen's grandson had a fever. And old Mr. Finch refused to leave his cat. Daniel walked down the cracked sidewalk past houses with open doors and empty windows. Curtains fluttered in the breeze. A child's red bike lay on its side near a driveway. He knocked on Mrs. Alvarez's door. She answered right away, her face tired but steady. Ready? He asked. She nodded, gripping her cane. Just help me with the tank. The medic said it'll last until orbit. He lifted the small oxygen unit and slung the strap over his shoulder. Together, they walked to the corner where a maglev transport idled, its doors open. 2 medics waited, scanning newcomers with handheld devices. Mrs. Alvarez climbed aboard slowly, and Daniel handed up the tank. Thank you, mijo, she said softly. He smiled. See you on the ship. Next was the Chen house. The boy, Leo, was wrapped in a blanket, his cheeks flushed. His mother held him tight. Daniel checked the boy's temperature on his pad. Still high but stable. The medics gave him a cooling patch and guided them onto the transport. Leo looked up at Daniel with wide eyes. Are we going to space? He whispered. Yeah, Daniel said. To a new world. The boy nodded as if that made perfect sense. Last was Mr. Finch's place. The old man sat on his porch swing, a gray cat curled in his lap. He didn't look up when Daniel approached. I'm not leaving without Whiskers, he said before Daniel could speak. You don't have to, Daniel replied. Pets are allowed. They've got habitats on the ships, Mr. Finch blinked. They do? Yep, big ones. With trees and sunlight simulators. The old man stood slowly, cradling the cat. Well then, guess we're going. Daniel helped him down the steps and walked with him to the transport. The cat meowed once, then settled into Mr. Finch's arms like it knew this was just another adventure. As the maglev pulled away, Daniel looked back at his neighborhood. It felt strange to leave it empty. He had taught generations of kids in that school down the street. He had eaten ice cream on that bench in the park. He had argued with his neighbors over lawn borders and recycling bins. Now it would all go quiet. Nature would take over. Grass would grow through the pavement. Birds would nest in the classrooms, but that was okay. Earth had given them everything. Now it was time to give Earth peace. Far away in Nevada, Priya Malik stood inside a deep underground facility known as Site Theta. The air was cool and hummed with the sound of machines winding down. She wore a gray jumpsuit, her dark hair pulled into a tight bun. On the wall before her, a control panel blinked with red and green lights. She typed in the final code. Shutdown sequence confirmed. A voice from the intercom answered. All personnel clear, proceed. Priya pressed the button. One by one, the fusion reactors powering the site powered down. Lights dimmed. Fans slowed. The great heart of human energy research fell silent. She walked through the empty corridors, turning off systems as she went. Water pumps, air filters, security drones. Each switch clicked like a farewell. In the main chamber, a hologram showed Earth from space. Tiny dots of light, shuttles rose from the surface like fireflies. She watched them go, one after another. She wasn't angry. Not really. The Galactic Council hadn't forced them to leave. Humans had chosen this. After the Titan disaster, after years of being treated like reckless children, Earth's leaders had gathered in secret and made a decision. If they couldn't be equals, they'd rather be alone. Priya reached the surface just as the sun dipped below the desert hills. Her ride, a small hover vehicle, waited near the gate. She climbed in and looked back at the facility. No flags, no signs. Just a plain concrete building that would soon be forgotten. The hovercraft sped toward the nearest spaceport, passing empty highways and silent towns. In the distance, launch towers glowed against the night sky. Ships were lifting off every few minutes, each carrying thousands. At the port, lines moved smoothly. Families checked in. Bags were scanned. Children held stuffed animals and stared at the giant ships overhead. Priya showed her badge and was waved through. She boarded a shuttle without looking back. Inside, seats filled quickly. A woman next to her clutched a photo frame. Her wedding day, beach, blue sky. A man across the aisle hummed an old song. No one cried. No one shouted. They were tired, yes, but also resolved. The shuttle's engines rumbled to life. The ground fell away. Earth shrank below, green, blue, beautiful. Priya pressed her hand to the window. She thought of all the things they were leaving. Oceans, mountains, libraries, bakeries, playgrounds, graveyards. But also wars, borders, pollution, greed. Maybe both needed to rest. In Geneva, the Concord liaison office stood dark. Rain tapped against its glass walls. Inside, monitors blinked off one by one. The last message had been sent hours ago. Now the building was empty, like so many others. On the street outside, a streetlight flickered. A dog trotted past, collar loose, looking for someone who wasn't coming back. Wind blew a newspaper down the road. The headline read, Final shuttle departs at dawn. High above, the Exodus fleet gathered in orbit. 10,000 ships, each one a piece of human hope. They didn't fire weapons. They didn't send threats. They simply turned as one and pointed their noses toward the Perseus Rift, the great storm of cosmic dust and energy that marked the edge of known space. Down on the surface, the last humans left. Cities emptied. Farms fell silent. Factories powered down. Oceans lapped at empty shores. Forests breathed without fear of axes or fires. Earth was not dying. It was healing. And humanity, for the first time in centuries, was choosing its own path, not because they were perfect, but because they were ready to try again, somewhere new, with no one watching over their shoulders. The last shuttle cleared the atmosphere just as the first light of dawn touched the Pacific Ocean. Below, the planet turned, quiet and whole. Above, the stars waited. No one knew what lay beyond the rift, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that they were going together, and they were finally free. Aboard the Odyssey Dawn, the air smelled faintly of metal and recycled oxygen. Captain Marcus Boone stood on the command deck, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the star map that glowed in the center of the room. Around him, crew members moved quietly, checking systems, updating logs, speaking in low voices. There was no music, no laughter, just the soft hum of engines and the occasional beep of a console. They had been traveling for 3 weeks now. 3 weeks since Earth vanished behind them, swallowed by distance and silence. The Exodus fleet stretched out in all directions, thousands of ships, each carrying its own story, its own weight of memory. But from here, they looked like a school of silver fish swimming through the dark. Marcus wasn't a man of many words. He'd spent most of his life in space, first as a cargo pilot, then as a rescue officer during the Mars dust storms, and finally as captain of Earth's last great hope. He didn't believe in grand speeches or heroic poses. He believed in clean engines, steady hands, and making sure his people had enough to eat. Status report, he said without turning. Warp drive stable. came the reply from Engineer Priya Malik, now stationed on the bridge. Life support at 98%. Food reserves holding, no signs of system stress. Good, Marcus said. Keep it that way. He walked to the viewport and looked out. Stars didn't twinkle out here. They burned steady and cold. Somewhere ahead lay the Perseus Rift, a swirling wall of ion storms, magnetic flares, and gravitational eddies that even the Galactic Concord avoided. Most species called it the edge of reason. Humans called it their doorway. They weren't running away. Not really. They were stepping out of a room that had grown too small, too judgmental, too full of rules that never seemed to apply to anyone else. The Concord had watched them like hawks waiting for them to slip up. And when they did, when the Titan station collapsed, they didn't offer help. They offered blame. Marcus remembered that day. He'd been on leave visiting his sister in New Seattle. The news came in the middle of breakfast. 12,000 lives lost, families screaming on live feeds. And then, hours later, the Concord's official statement. Humanity's lack of adherence to safety protocols has resulted in a preventable tragedy. No condolences. No aid. Just cold words on a screen. That was the moment Earth stopped asking for permission. Now, as the fleet approached the rift, Marcus felt no fear. Only focus. They had planned this route for years, using data stolen from old Concord surveys and patched together with human ingenuity. The rift wasn't empty. It was wild, unpredictable, but it was also unmapped, unclaimed, and free. Captain, said a young voice from the comm station. It was Leo Chen, the boy from Chicago, now serving as a junior signal officer. His fever had passed and his sharp mind had earned him a spot on the bridge. We're getting faint signals from the rear fleet. All ships report green. Marcus nodded. Tell them to stay tight. Once we hit the rift, comms might get choppy. Aye, sir. Back on Varel Prime, the Galactic Council watched. Their long-range drones hovered at the edge of human space, recording everything. They saw the fleet's formation, tight, disciplined, calm. They saw no weapons charged, no distress calls sent, just a slow, steady march into the unknown. In the council chamber, the mood had shifted. At first, there had been anger. Then confusion. Now something quieter. Regret. Councillor Vrel of the Kailari sat alone in her private chamber reviewing old footage. She watched humans sharing food with Grith refugees after the asteroid war. She saw Earth scientists giving free medical aid to a dying Xylosian colony. She even found a clip of a human child handing a flower to a Concord peacekeeper during a cultural festival. Only to be gently told, emotional gestures are not part of official protocol. She sighed, a soft ripple through her silver skin. We measured their actions, she murmured, but never their heart. Meanwhile, Jaron Voss, the young human analyst who had stayed behind, worked late in the archives. He wasn't supposed to be digging into restricted files, but no one stopped him anymore. Everyone was too busy asking the same question. Did we make a mistake? He pulled up a report titled, Human Behavioral Patterns, a Century of Observation. Page after page listed incidents, some violent, some kind, most just human. But the summaries always ended the same. Requires further oversight. Emotionally unstable. High risk of regression. Jaron closed the file and stared at the wall. He thought of his grandmother, who used to tell him stories about Earth, about rain on rooftops, about dogs chasing balls, about people helping strangers just because it felt right. None of that was in the reports. He typed a new message and sent it directly to the Kailari counselor. They didn't leave because they failed. They left because they outgrew us. He didn't expect a reply, but an hour later one came. Perhaps you're right. Aboard the Odyssey Dawn, night shift began. Marcus handed over command to First Officer Elena Ruiz, Daniel's older sister, a former naval strategist who had traded war plans for star charts. She gave him a tired smile. Go get some rest, she said. We've got this. He nodded and walked down the quiet corridor to his quarters. The walls were plain, the bed narrow, but the window showed the stars. He sat on the edge of the bed and pulled a small photo from his pocket. It showed him and his sister on a beach in Oregon laughing, sun in their hair. She hadn't made it onto the fleet. She'd chosen to stay, to care for their aging parents. He didn't blame her. Everyone had their own way of saying goodbye. Outside, the fleet crossed the first boundary of the Perseus Rift. The stars ahead began to blur, twisted by magnetic fields and charged particles. Lights flickered for a moment, then stabilized. Alarms stayed silent. The ship held. In the mess hall, crew members gathered in small groups. Some played cards, others wrote letters they might never send. A few just stared into their cups of synthetic coffee, thinking of home. But no one spoke of turning back, because there was no back to go to. Earth was gone, not destroyed, not abandoned, but released. And humanity, for the first time in its history, was sailing into the dark not as subjects, not as students, but as explorers. The conquered could watch all they wanted. They could file reports, hold debates, build memorials. But they couldn't follow. Not into the rift, not into the future, and maybe, just maybe, that was the point. As the Odyssey dawn slipped deeper into the storm of stars, Marcus closed his eyes. He didn't dream of Earth. He dreamed of a green world under a yellow sun, of children running through fields, of a quiet peace earned not by perfection, but by courage. The fleet moved on, silent, steady, free. Months passed. The Exodus fleet disappeared into the Perseus Rift, swallowed by storms of ionized gas and tangled magnetic fields. To the Galactic Concord sensors, the human ships blinked out one by one, like candles snuffed by a cold wind. At first they thought it was a glitch. Then they feared a disaster. But when no distress signals came, no wreckage, no cries for help, they realized the truth. Humanity had vanished on purpose. In the great chamber on Varel Prime, silence returned. But this time it was different. It wasn't the quiet of judgment or control. It was the quiet of loss. The council still met. They still debated trade routes and resource quotas. But now, when a new species petitioned for membership, someone would always ask, "Are they like the humans?" And no one knew how to answer. Counselor Vrel of the Kalari spent her days in the archives. She pulled up every file on Earth, every report, every video, every intercepted message. She watched footage of human cities rebuilding after earthquakes. She saw doctors working through the night in refugee camps. She even found a recording of a school choir singing under open skies, their voices rising like birds at dawn. None of it had been included in the official evaluations. Why? Because the conquered only measured what it feared, not what it admired. She called a private meeting with the Grith delegate, a broad-shouldered being named Torvak, whose people valued loyalty above all else. "We were wrong," she said simply. Torvak grunted, a sound like stone grinding on stone. "About what?" "About them. We called them reckless, but they rebuilt faster than any species we've seen. We called them emotional, but their compassion saved lives we would have written off. And when we failed them, when Titan fell, they didn't beg. They left with dignity." Torvak was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "My son served on a supply ship near Mars. A reactor leak. Humans patched it with scrap metal in their own hands. Saved 50 Grith lives. I never filed a report. I thought it was just human noise." Now both of them understood. They had mistaken noise for chaos and kindness for weakness. Meanwhile, Jaren Voss worked tirelessly in the lower levels of the conquered spire. He wasn't just an analyst anymore. He had become something new, a voice for the absent. He compiled a new dossier, one not ordered by any superior. He called it Humanity, misunderstood or mismanaged. It started as a quiet document, shared only with a few trusted colleagues. But within weeks it spread. Young delegates read it in secret. Elders referenced it in closed sessions. Even the Xylosians, who rarely changed their views, began to ask questions. One evening, Jaren stood on a balcony overlooking the city of light below. He held a small data chip, the final version of his report. On it he had written, "They didn't break your rules because they were wild. They broke them because your rules didn't leave room for hope." He sent it to every counselor. Then he walked back inside, not knowing if it would change anything, but he had to try. Back in the chamber, the mood shifted slowly like a glacier turning. The Grith delegation proposed something no one expected, a memorial. Not to mark humanity's failure, but their choice. A simple stone placed in the Hall of Departed Voices, engraved with Earth's coordinates and the words, "They asked to belong." "We asked them to be less," some delegates objected. The Xylosians said it would set a bad precedent. Others worried it would look like an admission of fault. But Vrel stood and spoke with quiet strength. "If we cannot admit we were wrong, then we do not deserve to guide others." In the end, the memorial was approved. On the day it was unveiled, no speeches were made. No ceremonies held, just a single stone, smooth and dark, placed beside those of other lost civilizations. But unlike the others, species wiped out by war or plague, Earth's stone carried no date of extinction. Only a question carved in soft script. What if we had listened? Far away beyond the rift, the Concorde's drones found nothing. No signals. No energy trails. Just empty space and the whisper of cosmic wind. Some scientists claimed humanity had been destroyed by the rift's storms. Others believed they had hidden, cloaked their ships, vanished into the folds of space-time. But the truth was simpler. They had gone where no one was watching, and that was exactly what they wanted. In the mess halls and quiet corners of the conquered spire, conversations changed. New recruits asked about Earth not as a cautionary tale, but as a mystery. What did they build out there? Do you think they're happy? Would they ever come back? No one knew. But the questions themselves were a kind of healing. Even the old guard began to soften. A Xylosian archivist who once called human art chaotic and inefficient now kept a small painting on his desk, a child's drawing of a sunflower, recovered from an abandoned school on Earth. He didn't know why he kept it. He just liked the way the yellow seemed to glow. Time moved on. Seasons turned on 100 worlds. New crises rose and fell. But the memory of humanity lingered not as a threat, but as a mirror. The conquered had prided itself on order, logic, and control. But in their quest for perfection, they had forgotten something essential. That growth often looks like mess, and courage often sounds like noise, and sometimes the bravest thing a species can do is walk away from a table where they're never truly welcome. Now, when a young delegate made a bold suggestion or questioned an old rule, the elders would pause, not to scold but to remember. And in that pause, something new began to grow. Not judgment, but humility. The humans were gone. But their absence spoke louder than their presence ever had. And in the quiet halls of power, the Galactic Council finally understood. It wasn't humanity that needed fixing. It was them, but it was too late to repair it. All they could do now was watch the stars and wonder what might have been. Years had passed since the Exodus fleet left known space. Time moved differently out here, where no calendars marked holidays and no clocks ticked to the rhythm of old worlds. The stars were new, the silence deeper, and the air aboard the Odyssey Dawn carried the quiet hum of a people who had stopped looking back. Captain Marcus Boone stood on the observation deck, hands resting on the cool railing. Before him, through the wide, transparent shield, hung a planet, blue-green wrapped in soft white clouds turning slowly in the light of a gentle yellow sun. Scans had confirmed it days ago. Breathable air, fresh water, stable climate, no signs of intelligent life. Just forests, rivers, mountains, and open sky. This was it, their new home. Behind him, footsteps approached. It was Leo Chen, now taller, his voice deeper, his eyes sharp with purpose. He held a data pad. Final landing teams are ready, sir. All habitats prepped. Soil samples look good for crops. Marcus nodded. Good work, Leo. He turned from the viewport and walked down the corridor, passing crew members who smiled but didn't speak. There was no fanfare, no speeches planned. They had said all they needed to say in the years of travel, in the shared meals, in the quiet watches during solar storms. Now action spoke louder than words. In the shuttle bay, families gathered with small bags and wide eyes. Children clutched toys or held their parents' hands. Some had never seen rain. Others had never felt grass under their feet. They had been born in the metal halls of ships, raised on stories of Earth, of oceans that went on forever, of trees that touched the sky, of nights lit only by stars. Now they would make their own stories. Daniel Ruiz stood near the ramp of Shuttle 7, helping an elderly woman onto the craft. She had been a botanist on Earth, one of the last to leave the Amazon research station. In her arms she carried seedlings wrapped in soft cloth, oak, maple, wheat, rice. Living pieces of a world left behind, ready to take root in a new one. Priya Malik checked the last engine readouts on the main ship. She would stay aboard for now, overseeing the orbital station that would remain in the sky. A watchful eye, a safe harbor, a bridge between ground and stars. She looked down at the planet through the ship's lens and whispered, "Welcome home." On the bridge, Elena Ruiz gave the final order. "Begin descent sequence." One by one, the shuttles lifted from the Odyssey dawn and glided toward the atmosphere. They didn't come as conquerors. They came as guests of the land of time of chance. They brought no flags, no borders, no old wars. Only tools, seeds, books, and hope. Marcus rode in the lead shuttle. As they entered the atmosphere, the hull trembled slightly, then steadied. Clouds parted. Below, a wide valley stretched out, green and calm, with a river winding through it like a silver thread. The landing zone was clear, a flat field near a grove of tall trees. The shuttle touched down with a soft thud. Silence. Then, the ramp lowered. Marcus stepped out first. The air was cool and smelled of earth and rain. He took a deep breath. It felt like the first real breath he'd taken in years. Behind him, people followed, slowly at first, then with growing wonder. A child ran ahead, laughing as her boots sank into the soft soil. An old man knelt and touched the ground with trembling fingers. A woman let out a quiet sob and hugged her daughter tight. They were here, not escaping, not hiding, just beginning. Back in orbit, the Odyssey dawn hovered like a guardian. Its lights glowed steady against the dark. On its hull, the name still shone, though it no longer carried the weight of exile. Now it carried promise. Far away, across the void, the Galactic Council still watched. Their drones had long since lost the trail. Their records listed humanity as departed, status unknown. But in the quiet moments, in the halls of the Great Spire, someone would sometimes look up at the stars and wonder, had they made it? Were they thriving? Did they ever think of the ones who let them go? No answers came. Only silence, but here on this new world, answers were being written every day. In the planting of the first garden, in the building of the first school, in the laughter of children who had never known fear of judgment. Marcus walked to the edge of the field and looked up at the sky. The Odyssey dawn was a bright star now watching over them. He thought of Earth, not with sadness, but with gratitude. It had given them life. Now this world would give them a future. He turned to his people. "This isn't just a new home," he said, his voice calm but strong. "It's a promise. We won't repeat the past, and we won't wait for permission to be great." No one cheered. They didn't need to. They just nodded, picked up their tools, and got to work. By nightfall, the first fire burned in the center of the camp. Not for warmth, nights were mild, but for light, for gathering, for memory. Stories were told. Songs were sung. Some were old, from Earth. Others were new, born in the silence between stars. High above, the stars shone without borders. No conquered, no rules, just endless dark and endless possibility. And somewhere in that dark, humanity had found its place, not by proving itself to others, but by believing in itself. The Galactic Council would keep its order, its laws, its perfect, polished peace. But out here in the wild unknown, something messier and more beautiful was growing. It was called freedom, and it was finally theirs.